For the children of Earth had come to the stars not as conquerors, but as protectors. They had brought with them the fire of the human spirit, the courage, the compassion, the unbreakable will that had lifted them from the caves to the heavens. And now, that fire spread, igniting the hearts of all those who yearned for freedom, for justice, for a better tomorrow. In the face of tyranny, in the face of oppression, in the face of the darkness that threatened to engulf the galaxy, there would always be those who would stand tall, who would fight for what was right. For that was the legacy of the indomitable. That was the legacy of humanity. Not a legacy of war, but of hope. Not of destruction, but of the unquenchable spirit that would never, ever give up. And so, as the stars wheeled overhead and the galaxy spun on, the story continued. New chapters were written, new heroes rose to face new challenges. But always at the heart of it all was the memory of a single ship and her valiant crew, a shining light in the darkness, a reminder of what could be achieved when the courage of the human spirit met the boundless potential of the stars. The Deathworlders had come, and the universe would never be the same. The end. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Alara gripped the arms of her chair as the ship hurtled towards the dreadnought, the massive vessel looming larger and larger in the view screen. "Steady," she murmured, her eyes locked on the target. "Steady." The Krodak ship opened fire, a storm of plasma and laser fire that slammed into the Indomitable's shields. The ship shuddered and groaned, alarms blaring, but it held its course, unwavering. "Shields at critical," Kerrigan shouted. "We're going to lose them." "Just a little more," Alara said through gritted teeth. "Almost there." And then they were through, the Indomitable slipping past the dreadnought's defenses like a dagger sliding between the ribs. With a roar of engines, it plunged towards the weak point, every gun and missile battery firing at once. There was a moment of stillness, a heartbeat where the universe seemed to hold its breath. And then, the dreadnought exploded, a sun-going nova, a cataclysm of light and sound and fury. The shockwave caught the Indomitable, tossing it like a leaf in a hurricane. On the bridge, consoles exploded and fires raged, the crew thrown about like rag dolls. And in the heart of the inferno, Alara Nova smiled, a smile of triumph and of peace. "We did it," she whispered, as the world faded to white around her. "We did it." In the aftermath, as the fires burned out and the wreckage cooled, the Zephyrians emerged from their bunkers and shelters, blinking in the light of a new dawn. The sky was clear, the Krodak's fleet nothing more than a memory and a scatter of debris. They had won. Against all odds, against all hope, they had won. The Deathworlders had come, had fought, and bled, and died for them, and in doing so, had given them the greatest gift of all, the gift of a future. And as the sun rose over a world reborn, the Zephyrians raised their voices in a song of mourning and of celebration, a hymn to the fallen heroes who had saved them all. The saga of the Indomitable, of Captain Alara Nova and her valiant crew, would be told and retold for generations to come, a legend of sacrifice, of courage, and of the unbreakable spirit of humanity. For the Deathworlders had come to the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same. Victory and beyond. In the days that followed the great battle, the Zephyrians began the long, slow process of rebuilding. The scars of war were everywhere, in the shattered cities, the burned forests, the haunted eyes of those who had seen too much, lost too much. But there was hope, too. For the first time in generations, the Zephyrians were truly free, free from fear, free from oppression, free to chart their own course among the stars. And they were not alone. The human survivors of the battle, those who had fought side by side with the Zephyrians, had become more than allies. They had become family. Together, they rebuilt. New cities rose from the ashes of the old, blending human and Zephyrian architecture in a symphony of form and function. In the fields and forests, new life bloomed, the land healing under the careful stewardship of both peoples. And in the heart of the new capital, a great memorial was raised, a towering spire of gleaming metal, inscribed with the names of the fallen. At its apex stood a statue of Captain Alara Nova, her gaze fixed on the horizon, a symbol of the indomitable spirit that had saved the world. The Zephyrians never forgot the sacrifice of the Indomitable and her crew. They became a part of the planet's lore, their stories woven into the very fabric of the culture. Children grew up hearing tales of the brave Captain Nova and her valiant stand against the Krodax, and every Zephyrian knew that they owed their lives and their freedom to the heroes of Earth. As the years turned to decades, the alliance between humanity and the Zephyrians only grew stronger. Trade flourished, cultural exchange blossomed, and the two species became a shining example of what could be achieved when different peoples worked together in harmony. And yet, the galaxy was still a dangerous place. The Krodax, though defeated over Zephyria, were not destroyed, and there were other threats lurking in the darkness between the stars. But now, the Zephyrians were ready. No longer the helpless, peaceful race they had once been, they had learned the ways of war from their human brothers and sisters. Their ships patrolled the space lanes, their soldiers stood ready to defend their homes and their allies. And always, the memory of the Indomitable shone bright, a beacon of hope and courage in a galaxy that often seemed so dark. Years turned to centuries, and the legend grew, on Earth and on Zephyria, in 100 other systems and 1,000 other worlds. The tale was told of how the Deathworlders had answered a call for help, and in doing so, had changed the course of history. In the heart of the Allied Command Center, Elder Thalia stood side by side with human officers, her eyes glued to the holomap that showed the ebb and flow of the battle. She had shed her robes of office for a simple uniform, a blaster pistol at her hip, a symbol of her people's willingness to fight for their future. "The Krodax are targeting our power generators," one officer reported, his brow furrowed. "If they take those out, our shields will fail." "Not on my watch," growled Colonel Marcus Graves, the grizzled commander of the human marine forces. "I'm taking the strike team to reinforce those positions. We'll hold the line or die trying." As Graves and his marines raced to the surface in drop pods, the battle in space intensified. The Krodax ships pressed their attack, hammering at the Allied defenses with relentless fury. One by one, Zephyrian and human ships fell, torn apart by the onslaught. But for every ship that fell, another surged forward to take its place, the crews fighting with a determination and courage that seemed to border on madness. They were the last line of defense, the only thing standing between the Krodax and the utter subjugation of yet another world. In the heart of the battle, the Indomitable danced and weaved, its shields flaring under the constant barrage. On the bridge, sparks flew and consoles exploded as the ship shuddered under the impacts. "Shields at 20%. Lieutenant Kerrigan shouted over the din. "We can't take much more of this." Alara gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles white. "Hold the line. Just a little longer. We have to give the evacuation ships time to clear the atmosphere." For in the midst of the chaos, a desperate plan was unfolding. The bulk of the Zephyrian population, along with the most essential elements of their culture and technology, were being loaded onto a fleet of transport ships, ready to flee into the depths of space if the worst should happen. It was a gamble. If the Krodax detected the transports, they would surely destroy them. But it was the only way to ensure that something of the Zephyrian civilization would survive, even if their world fell. As the battle raged on, a new threat emerged. From the bowels of the Krodax dreadnought, a massive energy weapon began to charge, its power building to a crescendo. "By the stars," Alara whispered, her eyes wide. "They're going to fire on the planet. They're going to wipe out everything." In that moment, the fate of a world hung in the balance. The Allies had fought bravely, had given everything they had. But against the sheer might of the Krodax, it seemed it might not be enough. The energy weapon pulsed, a sun in miniature, ready to unleash its devastating power. And on the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Alara Nova faced the hardest decision of her life, whether to stand and fight to the bitter end or to give the order to retreat, to save what they could and live to fight another day. The seconds ticked by, each one an eternity. And then, Alara made her choice. The turning point. All ships, this is Captain Nova. Prepare for emergency jump. We're getting out of here. The words tasted like ashes in Alara's mouth, but she knew it was the only way. If they stayed, they would all perish, and the Zephyrians would be lost forever. But if they fled, there was still hope, slim and fleeting, but real. As the Allied fleet broke formation, readying for the jump to hyperspace, Alara turned to her tactical officer. Lieutenant Kerrigan, I need a target. That dreadnought. It's the key. If we can take it out, the Krodax will be thrown into chaos. Kerrigan's fingers flew over her console, running simulations and calculations. There's a weak point in their rear shielding, near the engine core. But Captain, we'd have to get in close. Very close. Alara nodded, a grim smile on her lips. Then that's what we'll do. A surgical strike, right into the heart of the beast. The rest of the fleet will jump as planned, but we're going to buy them the time they need. The bridge crew exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. They knew what their captain was proposing, a suicide mission, a last desperate charge against overwhelming odds. But they also knew that it was the only way, the only hope for the Zephyrians, and for the future of the galaxy. I'm with you, Captain, said Commander Jacond, Alara's first officer. To the end. To the end, echoed the rest of the crew, their voices firm with resolve. As the fleet made the jump to hyperspace, the Indomitable turned, facing the Krodax dreadnought head-on. In the command center on Zephyria, Elder Thalia watched the holomap with bated breath, her heart pounding. What are they doing? She whispered. Why aren't they jumping with the rest? Beside her, Colonel Graves shook his head, a look of understanding on his battle-scarred face. They're giving us a chance, he said softly. They're sacrificing themselves, so that we can live. Hand combat and small unit tactics. It was a steep learning curve, and not all the Zephyrians took to it easily. They were artisans, philosophers, healers, not soldiers. But driven by the need to protect their families and their way of life, they persevered, pushing themselves beyond limits they had never dreamed of. In the ship's engineering bays, human and Zephyrian scientists worked side by side, poring over schematics and prototypes. They were working to bolster the fleet's defenses, to develop new weapons and technologies that could give them an edge against the Krodax. Leading the effort was Dr. Liam Sorensen, the Indomitable's chief engineer, a brilliant and unorthodox mind. He had a knack for thinking outside the box and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. We can't match the Krodax in numbers, he said, poring over a holographic display. But we can outsmart them. We need to be faster, more agile, and more innovative. One of his creations was a new type of shield, one that could not only absorb enemy fire, but redirect it back at the attacker. Another was a cloaking device that could render a ship invisible to sensors, allowing it to slip past enemy lines undetected. But even as the fleet grew stronger, the specter of the Krodax loomed over them. Reports came in of worlds falling, of entire species being subjugated or wiped out. The Krodax were on the march, and it seemed nothing could stand in their way. In the quiet moments between drills and planning sessions, Alara found herself drawn to Elder Thalia. The young Zephyrian leader had a strength and wisdom beyond her years, and a compassion that touched all those around her. Your people have taken on such a burden for us, Thalia said one night, as they stood watching the stars streak by the observation deck windows. I fear we will never be able to repay this debt. Alara shook her head. There is no debt. This is what we do. When the strong prey on the weak, when tyrants seek to crush the innocent, humanity will always stand in their way. It's in our blood, our very soul. Thalia was silent for a long moment. Then softly, You are a remarkable species, Captain Nova. The galaxy is brighter for having you in it." Just then, an alarm blared through the ship. Alara was instantly on alert, her hand going to her comm. "Report." The voice of her tactical officer, Lieutenant Kerrigan, crackled over the line. "Captain, long-range sensors have detected a massive Krodax fleet entering the sector. They're on an intercept course, and they're coming in fast." Alara's jaw tightened. It was the moment they had all been dreading, the moment they had been preparing for. The Krodax had found them, and the fate of the Zephyrians, perhaps of the entire galaxy, would be decided in the fires of battle. She turned to Thalia, her eyes blazing with determination. "It's time. Everything we've worked for, everything we've fought for, it all comes down to this. Are your people ready?" Thalia drew herself up, a queen and a warrior in equal measure. "We are Zephyrians, and we stand with humanity. Lead us to victory, Captain. Lead us to freedom." And with that, the fleets clashed, human and Zephyrian side by side. Against the might of the Krodax Empire, the battle for the future had begun. The Siege of Zephyria. The Krodax fleet emerged from warp like a swarm of angry hornets, their ships bristling with weapons and filled with soldiers eager for conquest. At their head was a massive dreadnought, a behemoth of black metal and pulsing energy, the personal flagship of Warlord Kazrak, the most feared commander in the Krodax Empire. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Alara Nova stood resolute, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Allied fleet was outnumbered and outgunned, but they had the advantage of position, hovering above the verdant world of Zephyria, the new home the refugees had claimed for their own. "This is where we make our stand," Alara said, her voice ringing clear through the tension. "This is where we show the Krodax and the galaxy what we're made of. All ships, assume defensive formation Delta 3. Prepare for incoming fire." The fleet moved like a well-oiled machine, human and Zephyrian crews working in perfect unison. The Zephyrian ships, once pleasure barges and trading vessels, had been hastily retrofitted with human weapons and shielding, transforming them into makeshift warships. The first wave of Krodax fighters screamed in, plasma cannons blazing. The Allied fleet responded with a barrage of missiles and rail gunfire, the vacuum of space lighting up with the deadly dance of destruction. On the surface of Zephyria, the ground trembled as the planetary defense cannons roared to life, sending streaks of superheated plasma into the sky. Squadrons of human and Zephyrian fighters launched from hidden bases, soaring up to meet the enemy in a dizzying aerial ballet. There was a moment of tense silence. Then the view screen flickered, and the harsh, angular face of a Krodax commander filled the screen. "You have no authority here, human," he snarled, baring sharp metallic teeth. "The Zephyrians are now a protectorate of the Krodax Empire. Interfere, and you will be destroyed." Alara's eyes narrowed. "We do not recognize your claim. The Zephyrians are a free people, and we will defend their right to self-determination. This is your final warning. Stand down, or face the consequences." The Krodax commander let out a harsh bark of laughter. "You are outnumbered and outmatched, human. You have no chance, but if you insist on throwing your lives away, we will be glad to oblige you." The screen went dark. Alara turned to her crew, her expression grim. "Red alert. All hands to battle stations. We're going in." As klaxons blared and the crew rushed to their posts, the Indomitable surged forward, shields raised and weapons primed. The Krodax ships turned to face them, bristling with gun batteries and missile pods. The first salvo was a shockwave that slammed into the Indomitable's shields, making the whole ship shudder. But the shields held, and the human vessel returned fire with a barrage of quantum torpedoes that stitched a line of explosions across the nearest Krodax cruiser. On the planet below, the Zephyrians watched in awe and fear as the Titans clashed above their world. In the Grand Assembly Hall, Elder Thalia clutched at her robes, her eyes wide. The humans, they came. They actually came. The battle rage, the Krodax's superior numbers slowly whittling away at the Indomitable's defenses. But the humans fought with a skill and ferocity that belied their smaller numbers, their advanced technology evening the odds. In a desperate gambit, Alara ordered a concentrated strike on the Krodax flagship, hoping to decapitate the enemy command structure. It was a risky move, leaving the Indomitable vulnerable for a crucial few moments. But it paid off. The flagship exploded in a blinding flash of light, and the Krodax lines faltered. Seizing the moment, Alara opened a channel to the surface. Zephyrian Elders, this is Captain Nova. We have broken the Krodax blockade, but they will soon regroup. We must evacuate as many of your people as possible before they return. There was a pause, then a soft, melodic voice responded. Captain Nova, I am Elder Thalia. Your arrival is a miracle we scarcely dared to hope for. But evacuation. Leave our homeworld. Is there truly no other way? Alara's voice was gentle but firm. Elder Thalia, the Krodax will not stop. They will burn your world and enslave your people. I know it's a hard thing to contemplate, but if you want your culture, your way of life to survive, you must come with us. We can offer you sanctuary until the threat is past. There was a long, heavy silence. Then Thalia spoke again, her voice thick with emotion. You are right, Captain. We must think of our children of the future. We will gather our people and place our trust in you. As shuttles began to ferry the Zephyrians up to the waiting human ship, Alara watched the planet below, a jewel shrouded in the smoke of war. She knew this was only the beginning, that the Krodax would pursue them, furious at being denied their prize. But she also knew that the Zephyrians had taken the first crucial step on a journey that would change them, and the galaxy forever. Under the protection of humanity, they would learn, adapt, and grow. They would forge an alliance that would one day shake the stars, and the Krodax would learn to fear the name of the Deathworlders and those who called them friends. Preparations for war. The refugee fleet, a ragtag collection of human and Zephyrian ships, sped through the void, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the pursuing Krodax. On the Indomitable, now the de facto flagship of the fleet, Captain Alara Nova gathered her officers and the Zephyrian elders in the ship's conference room. The Krodax will not rest until they have hunted us down, she said, her gaze sweeping the room. We must prepare for the battles to come. Elder Thalia, her once pristine robes now rumpled and stained, stepped forward. Captain, we are a peaceful people. We have no warriors, no weapons. How can we possibly fight against the might of the Krodax Empire? Alara met her gaze, a fire burning in her eyes. You have us. The UESS will stand with you, and we will teach you to defend yourselves. It will not be easy, and it will require sacrifices. But together, we can forge an alliance that will stand against any foe. And so, under the guidance of the human crew, the Zephyrians began to train. They learned to operate the ship's systems, to man the gun batteries, and pilot the fighters. In the cargo bays, makeshift training grounds were set up, where human marines drilled the Zephyrian volunteers in the arts of Hanto. The distress call. The Zephyrian homeworld was a peaceful blue-green jewel nestled in the spiraling arm of the Andromeda galaxy. Its gentle hills were blanketed with swaying lavender grasses, and crystalline spires rose from tranquil silver seas. For millennia, the Zephyrians had cultivated a harmonious existence, guided by the principles of nonviolence and universal kinship. But now, an ominous shadow had fallen across their serene planet. The warships of the Krodax Empire, known for their relentless conquests and cruel subjugation of lesser species, had appeared in their skies. The Krodax had swept through the outer colonies like a plague, enslaving entire populations and stripping worlds bare of resources. In the Grand Assembly Hall, the Zephyrian elders gathered in solemn council. Elder Zona, her brow furrowed with concern, addressed the gathered leaders. The Krodax fleet will reach our world in a matter of cycles. Our defenses are woefully inadequate, and our people know nothing of war. We face an existential threat unlike any we have ever known. Elder Xan, known for his wisdom and foresight, spoke up. In our hubris, we thought our peaceful ways would shield us from the horrors of the galaxy. But now we must face the bitter truth. We are defenseless against the oncoming storm. A murmur of despair rippled through the assembly. The Zephyrians had no warriors, no great battleships or mighty weapons. They had poured their efforts into art, science, and the cultivation of the mind. And now it seemed these noble pursuits would be their undoing. But Elder Thalia, the youngest of the council, stood tall and spoke with quiet conviction. There is one hope, though it may seem a distant and fading star. The humans of Earth, the ones they call Deathworlders. The assembly fell silent. The humans were a legend whispered of in the far reaches of the galaxy. Their homeworld was said to be a crucible of danger and adversity, forging a species of unmatched resilience and indomitable will. The Zephyrians had long dismissed the tales as exaggerations, myth mixed with half-truths. But now, faced with their own mortality, they felt the first stirrings of desperate hope. Elder Thalia continued, her voice gaining strength. The humans have technology that rivals the Krodax, and a spirit that has never been broken, no matter the odds. They are our only chance. We must send a distress call, and pray they answer. And so, with trembling hands and racing hearts, the Zephyrians composed a message and cast it into the void, across the vast expanses of space and time. They spoke of their plight, of the coming darkness, and of their need for a savior. As the signal raced across the stars, the Zephyrians huddled in their cities of glass and silver, watching the skies with a mixture of hope and dread. They did not know what form their salvation might take, or if it would come at all. Parsecs away, in the swirling infinity of the Milky Way, a blinking light appeared on the communications array of the UESS Indomitable, the pride of the United Earth Space Service. Captain Alara Nova, her eyes sharp and alert, leaned forward in her command chair. "What have we got, Ensign?" The young officer at the comm station typed rapidly, his face awash in the glow of holographic displays. "It's a distress call, Captain, from the Andromeda Galaxy. A species called the Zephyrians. They say they're under attack by the Krodax Empire." Alara's jaw tightened. The Krodax, ruthless, implacable, and bent on galactic domination. The UESS had clashed with their kind before. She glanced around the bridge, taking in the faces of her crew. A diverse mix of humanity's best and brightest, each one a testament to the strength and determination of their species. She nodded, a glint of steel in her eyes. "Plot a course, maximum speed. If someone out there needs help, then by the stars, we're going to answer the call." That's what humans do. The Indomitable leaped to life, its mighty engines surging with power as it hurtled through the cosmos, racing toward a distant world in peril, and a destiny that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. First contact. The UESS Indomitable dropped out of warp on the fringes of the Zephyrian system, its sleek hull glinting in the light of a foreign sun. On the bridge, Captain Alara Nova stood tall, her gaze fixed on the viewscreen that showed the lush, green world of the Zephyrians and the ominous shapes of Krodax warships looming in orbit. "Open a channel," she commanded, her voice steady. "This is Captain Alara Nova of the United Earth Space Service vessel Indomitable. We are responding to a distress call from the Zephyrian people. Krodax vessels, you are hereby ordered to stand down and withdraw from this system."